to this form, but yeah.
Oh, okay. So you're like a demon in his dark materials, where like when your accompanying person reaches a certain level of maturity,
I just stay a certain way.
yeah. Good to know. Today we're gonna read a little more of How to Keep Your Cool, aka On Anger,
Yeah.
by Seneca, and give you our thoughts as we go along. So let's get that going, yo.
Yeah, let's dive in.
Um,
Off on 3.9.
yeah.
So yeah. Alright, I will read it. Alright. So angry people should avoid weighty undertakings, or at least those that push them past the point of exhaustion. Their minds should not be employed in difficulties, but given over to enjoyable arts. Let the reading of poetry calm them, and history amuse them with its stories. Let them be diverted gently and sensitively. Pythagoras used the lyre to resolve troubles of the mind, and who does not know that, while bugles and trumpets are stimulants, certain songs have a soothing effect by which the mind is relaxed into sleep. Shades of green are a help to confused eyes, and a weak eyesight finds comfort in certain colors, while others blunt it with their brightness. Similarly, joyful pursuits can calm ailing minds. We must flee the form, the law offices, the courts, and everything that makes our vice fester. We must also beware of physical exhaustion, for it wears away whatever is gentle and peaceful in us and arouses the harsh parts. Ooh, I got something to say about that. Hunger and thirst, too, must be avoided for the same reasons. They grate on and inflame the mind. It's an old saying that quarrels are sought by the weary, just as much, too, by the hungry and the thirsty, and by every man who yearns for anything. For just as wounds are pained by a light touch, or even the apprehension of a touch, so the afflicted mind is offended by the slightest things, so much so that some people have filed suit over a greeting, a letter, a speech, or a question. Ailing things can't be touched without a fight being provoked.
You know what that last bit reminded me of? That very last bit,
What?
the debate over Happy Holidays versus Merry Christmas,
Yeah.
and how when that first started, there were literal freedom of speech suits by Christian groups against corporations that were instituting Happy Holidays as a policy.
Yeah.
Which I thought was stupid, but it goes to Seneca's point. Like, apparently this shit was happening way before us.
Right. Yeah.
And you said you had something to say about a bit of that passage.
Yeah. Physical exhaustion. Yeah, I've had a few experiences where I've been so physically exhausted that it's really difficult to maintain, I guess, a sense of equilibrium in my mind.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like okay, so when you're exercising, like vigorously exercising towards a certain point, like there's kind of the point where like you feel a little exhausted, but you're still kind of energetic, except for those people who just go hard and completely do it to the point of physical exhaustion. Like that's their day. I've met people like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like when you're at that point of physical exhaustion, it's a lot harder for me to maintain balance in my head. Like I'm more prone to like sound irritable and like get really short with people. Like
It's funny because I had a similar but very different type of experience. Like, so in a sense, like it depends on the person, and I
right.
think Seneca would agree. Like this whole passage is written toward what he saw as a type of individual.
Hmm.
Um, but like, I mean, there's still some, and what I'm about to say is still like lends itself to making Seneca correct. But it's weird because like very recently, obviously, some stupid things have happened
Yeah.
in the country where we live.
Hmm.
And that particular day, I was not really in the mood to deal with anybody or anything. So I worked out really hard, really fast. And then I went for a walk for like 2 hours. And by the time I came back, like somebody was like, Oh, I hope I didn't make you like anxious or anything earlier because they were the ones that brought it up to me. Because I didn't know because I don't have broadcast TV or anything.
Right.
And I make a point not to look at the news, and I'm going to stick to that. Um, but I was like, oh no, I'm cool now. I'm too exhausted to care.
Yeah.
Like that was my response, and I guess there's a couple ways to take that. Either the way that I meant it was that I'm too exhausted to invest any emotional energy into like what's going on. It's not literally like I don't care, but I'm too exhausted to expend any energy on it. And so there's that effect, but then at the same time, I didn't really feel like dealing with anybody else's bullshit either. So like it still makes Seneca correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like I was literally just too exhausted to give a shit. Oh, so yeah, like I ended up going to sleep early that day
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Some.
waking up late. Oh,
Yeah. Whatever is gentle and peaceful in us and arouses the harsh parts. Yeah, I like that line.
yeah, and I mean, he's hinting at something very broad and essential.
Mm-hmm.
It's important to try to find. I mean, like, okay, so the term work life balance often gets criticized as being like unachievable,
Right.
but what I will say is that there's something to be said about finding a balance that works for you rather than eventually turning against you.
Right.
Yeah, I guess that's the way I'll put that. Oh, yeah. Anything else about that?
And also how he talked about using the arts like poetry or reading history or something like that. I still feel that that's a pretty decent remedy for people who are short tempered.
And I think not enough people give it any credit.
Yeah, yeah.
We've kind of reduced the arts to like a diversion
Mhm.
culture. Like, oh, they're not important. They're just like we were talking about this earlier. Because this also kind of talks about Seneca's point on the arts. Like we devalue it here.
Yeah,
Um, when this whole COVID thing started happening, um, people were spending a lot of time at home watching movies because they thought it was going to blow over in a week. Uh,
right.
Wrong. But there was this debate going on online that was talking about how, um, arts are a waste of time, useless degrees, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
And, somebody said, who do you think writes all the shit you watch on Netflix or where
Hmm.
you consume your content? Like somebody had to want to learn enough about it to like pursue that and then put that to use.
Yeah.
And I mean, to Seneca's point, like a lot of these people, like if you meet a lot of like people that work in the arts, they're very high strung people.
Yes, they are.
They have very, very strange temperaments. Like I have a strange temperament, but like people who make a life at the arts, which I suppose I might end up doing.
Hmm.
Um, but people who I know that are trying to make a life at the arts have very, very weird hangups.
Yeah.
Like they're very not ever calm. Not really. Like even when they appear calm, they're not.
Right.
Yeah. So, and I think the arts do something to like let that energy out into something productive. So, I guess that's to say, like, try not to devalue the arts, man. They're important
Yeah, they are.
because they do soothe something. That's for sure.
So yeah, that's mostly what I had to say.
Cool.
Okay. So next, 310. It is best, therefore, to restrain oneself at the first sign of the evil, than to give as little rein as possible to one's words and to block the onset. It's easy to detect when one's emotions first arise, since the hallmarks of the ailments precede them. Just as the warning signs of a storm or rainfall preceded, similarly, there are advanced signals of anger, love, and all those whirlwinds that disturb our minds. People who are subject to seizures know that the malady is arriving if the heat leaves their extremities. Their vision dims, they feel a nervous trembling, their memory fails them, and their head whirls around. They hold it off at the beginning by employing the usual remedies. Whatever it is that possesses their minds is beaten back by a stimulus to the taste or smell, or poultices are applied to fight against the chill and stiffness. Or, if medicine cannot do enough to help them, they seclude themselves and have their fit with no onlookers. It is useful for each of us to recognize our own illness and to suppress its strength before it spreads. We should consider what irritates us most of all. For some, it's affronts of speech, for others, of deeds. This one wants consideration for high rank, that one for good looks. One longs to be thought highly refined, another deeply learned. One can abide arrogance, another stubbornness. One thinks his slaves are not even worth getting mad at, another is fierce at home but gentle in public. One thinks it an injury to be asked for something, another an insult not to be asked. People are not all wounded in the same spot. It behooves you to know what part of you is vulnerable so you can protect it most of all. Yeah, I feel like this is probably one of the most insightful lines in this whole text.
Dude, I could not agree more.
Yeah, like it behooves you to know what part of you is vulnerable so you can protect it most of all. So this this throws like this impales that stoic stereotype of like, oh, it's all about repressing emotion, but really though it's more about how can you best minimize those negative aspects when it happens.
Yeah.
Because he's acknowledging the fact that like yeah, like the ethics and stoicism, like they can help you and help you like better yourself and all that, but he's acknowledging that we have a lot of soft spots and our duty is to recognize them and work to like protect them or understand them so that we can protect it better.
I I agree. Yeah, I could not have said it better.
Yeah, because this is basically a paragraph about human nature.
So, in offshoots of what you were saying, I don't think Seneca gets enough love in the modern Stoicism community. Um,
Yeah,
I mean, there's a lot of like people who fancy themselves amateur Stoic academics that have all kinds of opinions about who Seneca was as a person and
mm,
like why we shouldn't pay attention to his ideas. Like one of our philosophy professors said, your generation has a tendency to want to psychoanalyze the person behind the idea to determine whether the idea is valid.
yeah,
I'm making it clearer than the way he put it because he put it in that weird folksy way that he does.
right.
But the point that I want to make is that the progenitor of an idea, the place that an idea comes from, is not a reason to make an idea valid or invalid. It's the idea and the argument itself. So whether you look at Seneca's life and you look at him like I do, and you look at him as a person who was deeply flawed and lived a very complex and turmoil-filled life. I was going to say tumultuous, but then turmoil came out.
Yeah,
Um, who tried to live up to these ideas, and in a lot of cases, his flaws got the better of him.
yeah,
But he wrote about this shit extensively. He was a keen observer of human nature, both in his plays and in his prose.
yeah.
And he was a statesman. So, regardless of how his life ended and whether or not I think he lived up to the Stoic ideal, which, newsflash, no one really can,
Right.
I find the fact that he is flawed helpful because I suck. And knowing that this guy, who is wiser than I will ever be, sucked as bad as I do, it's helpful to me to know that. Um, you know what I mean?
Right.
And like he makes a really good point here about like you said, understanding like no matter what we do, we're still vulnerable.
Right.
We still have weaknesses, and
Mm-hmm.
we should be aware of that and deal with it in a way that minimizes harm.
Yeah.
And like what I was gonna say about Seneca not getting enough love, I went off on a tangent and forgot. Um, Sometimes, and to some extent, this is a fault of format. So like I've taken a few um, Stoic related courses via the internets in the time of COVID and before.
Mm-hmm.
And like, no matter how many times the facilitators of these courses try to say that Stoicism isn't about repressing emotion or suppressing anything, a lot of the highlights that they pull from hint at that, even if that's not what they're saying. And it's very easy for someone to come away with that impression, regardless of how much you try to say that this isn't what Stoicism is about.
Yeah.
So I think people like Seneca, and this specifically, that's why I think these perspectives are important.
Right.
Um, Man, I might just start talking about like Buddhaism, dog. Uh,
Yeah.
I think it's time to actually make that a thing. Because it solves a lot of issues, because it comes at things from a bunch of different angles,
Mm-hmm.
but it basically arrives at the same conclusion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, So yeah, for people dealing with that, like, dude, like I used to think journaling or like writing my feelings down was bullshit because like every time I would write things, I would relive them. And if you're one of those people, just keep doing it because eventually that stops.
Yeah.
It took years, but it stops because you get so bored of hearing the same stories worked out in different ways on paper that they stop having as much emotional weight. And then when you actually relive those memories, it's difficult, but you understand that now, like, you have a means to process them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hope that was relevant. Holy crap. Sometimes I don't know.
Right. Let's move on. 311. It's not to your benefit to see and hear everything. Many injuries ought to pass over us. If you ignore them, you get no more injury from them. You want to be less angry? Ask fewer questions. Those who investigate what was said against them, who flesh out mean spirited talk even if it was being kept secret, are themselves the source of their own turmoil. It's only interpretation that causes things to look like injuries. In fact, some of them ought to be put off until later, others laughed off, still others forgiven. Anger should be fenced off by various means. Most things should be turned into sport and jest. They say that Socrates, struck by a blow to the head, said nothing more than, "It's annoying how one doesn't know when to go out wearing a helmet. It doesn't matter how an injury was done, but how it was received."
I got something to say about that whole thing about, yeah.
Yeah, I don't understand why self-control is so difficult, since I know that even tyrants, their temperaments puffed up by both wealth and power, have suppressed the harshness that comes naturally to them. Once, the story goes, a drunken man was talking freely at a banquet against the cruelty of Pisistratus, tyrant of Athens, and had no lack of helpers willing to lend their hands and add fuel to the fire in this place or that. Can't even say his name right. Pisistratus bore it all with calm mind and replied to those needling him that they didn't anger him any more than if some blindfolded man had happened to bump against him. So yeah, you were gonna say,
The end of the passage. Oh, shit. Um, I keep forgetting when you minimize things, they disappear. um, you know how he was saying that, like, in fact, most things should um, basically be either laughed off, ignored, forgiven, or like turned into jest or sport.
yeah,
So, like, naturally, I have a really like pointed, self-deprecating kind of dark sense of humor. and modern psychology says this is bad. Like people tell me, and shit, my therapist told me years ago that it's a sign of low self-confidence. I'm like, nah, it's not really. It's my way of remembering that I do still struggle with these things and that they're kind of funny
Yeah.
because they're stupid. They're stupid because they're things I can't change.
Right.
Like I was telling my sister, here's an example. So I make a lot of jokes about being gimpy.
Mm-hmm.
It's because I'm insecure about it, right? Like my sister asked me one day, like, what do I think like affected the way that I saw myself? And I was like, it's easy, being gimpy.
Yeah.
Like when you like, she's like, oh, you didn't think like you were ugly or whatever. I'm like, no, if I could walk, I wouldn't have thought that at all. The reason I thought I was ugly is because gimpy. Because like when I was in school, like people would when I'd ask a girl on a date and they'd literally be like, "Ew, you're in a wheelchair. Why would I do that?" That was a literal thing that I was told, like over and over again.
Yeah.
Or like when a girl would break up with me, they'd be like, "Please, please, please, please don't think it's because of your legs." Like if you say that over and over, like that's the first thing I'm gonna think.
Right.
It's like don't press the red button.
Mm-hmm.
So I make jokes about it all the time to remind myself that it's still a thing,
Yeah.
so that I'm not blindsided when other people do it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like what Epictetus said. Oh, if they're making fun of me for that, like if they knew me well, they'd also make fun of these things.
Right.
And I've been doing that for a long time. And people think like I don't have any confidence in myself in any area when I do that. They're like, oh, it's not attractive, and I'm like, well, fuck you then, like, because you don't understand what's going on. I
Right.
mean, yeah. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I know what you mean because yeah, I was gonna say I'm kind of self-deprecating myself, but I don't remember making a self-deprecating joke recently, but it's usually with people I'm really close to.
Yeah,
Like I allow other people to think whatever they want because like I kind of enjoy it, so that when I do something they don't expect, they're completely surprised by it.
exactly.
Yeah, but I know exactly what you're saying. I mean, I was sometimes I think I am still kind of socially awkward, but I was really shy and awkward.
I
Even
I remember.
yeah. So like I didn't even know how to ask for certain things by myself.
Same.
Yeah, so it just kind of led to this cycle of low self-esteem and all of that. But joking about your faults and weaknesses, I feel, is a source of strength, especially when things start getting too dark up here.
Yeah,
Like,
and that's the other thing. Like it teaches you like if you guys are anime fans, it's like, if you're watching Full Metal Alchemist, the law of equivalent exchange, right? Like
yeah,
right? And it's like learning to take those things that you have a tough time dealing with and learning how to make them into something that you and everybody else can laugh about.
yeah. It's also why, like, sometimes we watch stupid, funny things like on TV or video. Hell, even some songs like some of the songs I've been listening to, they're really kind of funny in a satirical way because like it makes fun of a lot of things we take for granted.
Yeah, I mean, like one of my go-tos is the Harold and Kumar
Right. Yeah.
set, basically. Like it's dumb, but like I enjoy it because it makes fun of a lot of things.
Yeah, like those expectations we have or
Yeah,
the stereotypes that we've had about certain people, but then they just completely subvert it.
yeah, like that scene with President Bush in the second film
Yeah.
where they crash into the dude's house and he's just like, "Wait, you smoke weed, but you kept it illegal for everyone else to do." He's like, "Yeah, you like this thing, right? Well, does that make you this?" And it's like, "No." Well, then shut the fuck up and smoke my weed. I mean, that was I mean, it's a stupid line on one level, right? Like, it's a stupid scenario.
Mm-hmm.
But it says something that I think is true. Like,
Right.
I mean, so often we have difficulty turning issues over in our heads, like really examining them because we have our own biases and shit. And I think the thing that the Stoics realized really early on
Yeah.
is that learning to look at things from multiple angles, A, takes work, and B, is a fruitful endeavor that yields other, um, I was going to say victories, but no, other assets.
Right.
And they also realized that these perspectives could be changed with practice. So, like I say every stream, neither of us are sitting here saying we know everything. We don't. In fact, the reason we do these streams is because we suck at certain things and we use these as reminders.
Yeah.
Uh, so, yeah, that's why I encourage people to ask questions and actually talk to us. People are freaking shy, dude.
Yeah, they are.
Unless you're on Twitch and then people spend hours saying inane things that don't really amount to much. And I know because I be doing it.
Yeah. But how much of this do you want to read?
How much of this do you want to read? You're the one that has to go to work soon.
I was thinking just reading 313, and then maybe we could read something from Meditations before we end the stream.
All right.
Okay. So 313 looks like you're on 311.
Oh, why did I go back to 311?
All right. Struggle against yourself if you want to conquer anger. You can't allow it to conquer you. You'll begin to conquer it if it stays hidden, if no exit is permitted to it. Let's obscure its signs and keep it shrouded in secret as much as we can. This will be achieved only with great exertion, since anger longs to leap out, set the eyes blazing, and contort the face. But if it's allowed to project beyond us, it will have gotten above us. Let it stay buried in the deepest recess of the heart. Let it be born, not bear us with it. Rather, let's change all its manifestations to their opposite. Relax the face, soften the voice, slow the step, bit by bit. Inner feelings will conform to outer signs. In Socrates' case, it was a mark of his anger if he lowered his voice and spoke more sparingly. It seemed as though he were blocking himself. His friends, then, used to grab him and admonish him, and this reproach for his hidden anger was not unwelcome to him. Shouldn't he have been pleased that, though many understood his rage, no one felt it? They would have felt it if he had not given his friends the right to chastise him, just as he assumed that right over them. How much more necessary for us to do these things? We should ask each of our closest friends to take the most liberty in opposing us at the very moment when we are least tolerant of that liberty, and not to consent to our anger. Rather, let's summon help against this powerful, yet in our minds pleasing evil, at times when we are thinking clearly, when we have ourselves in hand. Those who can't tolerate wine and fear the rashness and intemperance of their drunkenness, bid their attendants to carry them out of the banquet hall. Having seen how recklessly they act when ill, they forbid people to follow their own commands when their health has a downturn. It is best to look ahead for ways to block our known vices, and above all, to so compose our mind that even when battered by sudden and weighty affairs, it either doesn't feel anger, or if anger does get stirred up by the scale of the unexpected injury, the mind drags this feeling back into its depths. It gives no vent to its pain. It will be clear to you that this is possible if I adduce a few examples out of a vast store that teach us how much evil anger contains when wielded with the full force of the very powerful, and how much it can govern itself when suppressed by a fear that surpasses it.
What do you want to say about that?
Um, I think this is, well, for one, he anticipated what modern psychologists were saying about um, conforming your inner feelings to outer signs, slowing down how you speak, relaxing the face, because psychologists have done studies where, let's say someone was feeling angry, but then they just had them smile most of the time, or just um, slow down how they were talking, and then they
Yeah.
found that their anger was starting to dissipate. And it works vice versa. Like if they were told to contort their face and like not even thinking about angry things, but just contorting their face in an expression that looked angry, they would start to feel that anger inside. So, these are like detailed like studies, like, but it seems like the Stoics, or at least Seneca in particular, seem to have already observed that. I mean, hell, maybe even Socrates, even.
Yeah.
He was a pretty observant dude.
Well, okay, so I took like a couple different courses with Donald Robertson, then I did a couple other with like
Yeah,
different
yeah.
people. I remember Donald was saying something like over the years he's made a point of whenever he feels angry about something,
Hmm.
like 99% of the time, with very few exceptions, he will intentionally slow everything down.
Yeah.
Like the way he speaks, the way that he's moving, the way that he breathes, because he's learned not only from his training when he was a CBT practitioner, but from studying all of this stuff out of personal interest, that's been really effective.
Right.
And, like it's just exactly what you were talking about. And it's funny to think about it because like I'm a teeth clencher when I work out, right? Like I can feel my jaw clenching.
Hmm.
And like that's one of the things I do when I'm mad. And like I do definitely feel a difference.
Yeah.
Um the same goes for like when I make a fist, like when I'm practicing old stuff.
Hmm.
Like those same um physiological occurrences evoke like some sort of internal emotional response.
Yeah.
So I mean, it is that's what it is. You know?
Right.
Um Also, I'm one of those people that tends to, think that everything is an offshoot of CBT these days.
Hmm. Yeah.
Even people that tell me, no, DBT is different. And I'm like, if you look at the history of DBT rose out of CBT. So
Yeah.
I'm just saying CBT plus Buddhist mindfulness equals DBT. And it usually arises out of a misunderstanding of what Stoic mindfulness actually is.
Yeah.
And they think Buddhism does it better. And in some ways, I got to be honest with you, I think it does. Because it gives people more of a fixed mechanism to help deal with certain things, whereas like Stoicism really doesn't.
Right.
It's more like fighting your thoughts with other thoughts.
Yep.
And
Pretty
sometimes that just doesn't, sometimes that's not the most effective way to deal with the thing.
I definitely agree. Trying Stoic mindfulness out for a bit. Because sometimes I just don't want to think about anything.
Sometimes that's the best solution to just let the thoughts themselves settle over time.
Yeah, like I don't want to always combat a negative thought with something. Like reframing is very useful, but what I'm saying is like sometimes you just want to break from it all.
No, dude, I agree.
Yeah.
Where'd my book go? Crap.
Like like a couple days ago I was out by Salmon Falls and nature and all that and hiking. And the silence there is a silence I'm not used to, but one I could get used to very quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and um, I was gonna make a cynic joke.
Go for it.
Yeah, because the cynics were like kind of like anti-society, even anti-philosophy, I might even say, but it stemmed from the fact that like, oh, we shouldn't be so pretentious and like saying that we're better than nature or above the animals, like we're still animals. I'm not certainly advocating that we should just give up our place in society and live out in the mountains, but I will say that having those moments is definitely useful.
I understand why certain people have chosen that.
Oh yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I've definitely thought about it.
Same.
Yeah, because this urban life is sometimes it's very depressing.
I feel like I would be a terrible hermit, though. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know.
I'm trying. Is there anything? I wish this had a topical index like my other copy did.
Right. But I think I found one already.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that was quick. Let me see. Okay, I think I got one. Where's yours in this book?
It's on page 108.
Is it number 36?
Oh, is that the one you picked?
Yes.
Because that's the one I picked.
Okay, then we'll just share one.
All right, that's fine.
Cause I mean, okay.
Don't let your imagination be crushed by life as a whole. Don't try to picture everything bad that could possibly happen. Stick with the situation at hand and ask, why is this so unbearable? Why can't I endure it? You'll be embarrassed to answer. Then remind yourself that past and future have no power over you, only the present, and even that can be minimized. Just mark off its limits, and if your mind tries to claim that it can't hold out against that, well then, heap shame upon it.
Marcus, a lot like Epictetus, was a very austere type of individual,
Mm-hmm.
which sometimes in my younger years was extremely off-putting. But then I realized that he was just disciplining himself. Essentially.
Yeah.
Do you think Hado would agree with that, with his like the way that he interprets the function and form of the meditations?
Yeah, I would definitely say so.
Oh, cool. Okay, because I haven't read Hadot.
Yeah, Hadat.
I mean, what do you think about this passage, dude?
I think it's a good way of putting framing things in perspective. Because still working on it. Like sometimes, like the the pull of the future kind of determines how I think about certain things, and I just gotta remember, like it's all really uncertain and fluid.
It's just a series of now,
Basically, yeah. Like
day by day.
yeah, like I try not to think so far in the future. Like I'll have certain ideas of like, oh, I would want to do this, but it I just leave it as kind of like, oh, if I mean I'm starting to say this now, but I say if the fates are willing or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Force willing.
Mm-hmm. It's funny.
Um,
I used that expression recently.
oh, force willing or fate willing?
Fate's willing. Like the fates decreed something something.
Um, like one of the things that it reminded me of, because like obviously being, because I mean, you took what was that, the SMRT course with me, and a lot of what comes up there is people having problems with negative visualization, or what they call negative visualization.
I remember.
People were like, well, it just makes me anxious, like I have an anxiety disorder and like this and that. And first of all, like you should practice it with somebody that actually knows what they're doing. And if you have an anxiety attack or a panic attack, like somebody who's able to help you,
Right.
especially if you don't. I love the internet because it enables me to learn anything I want, but then I realize that not everybody is going to be like me when they try to acquire a skill, and that they try to learn the background, the pros and cons, the cautionary things. Like I did the same. Like I talked about doing drugs on here before. I don't really do drugs anymore, but I did.
Yeah.
And like even when I was doing that, I would research the crap out of any drug I took before I took it.
Yep.
I mean, weeks and weeks.
Mm-hmm.
To the point where I had read like 3 papers, scientifically validated papers on each drug I took, and then I read a bunch of like firsthand accounts and all this other stuff before I even took the plunge. Like that's just how I am as a person.
Right.
But like taking classes like that showed me that like most people don't really do that.
Mm-hmm.
Like even people that I thought were really, really like smart don't really approach things that way. Some people have this expectation that everything's going to be made clear to them
Yeah.
through the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
like, that's not how learning works. Learning works by like doing it. I mean, people say, "Oh, there are personality types that could just read a list and do things perfectly." I'm like, no, they're not. They can do things well enough, but they'll never do it that well unless they've had enough like firsthand experience. Like I've known people that are very gifted at just taking things from a book and being like, "No, I can do this thing," but then they think it's not good yet because they're not comfortable. That's where experience comes in.
Yeah.
And so, like with negative visualization, which he talked about, like in this passage, like don't just picture everything that, everything going poorly or everything going wrong. Like, and that's what people do when they first hear the term. And that's why, like, Donald, for example, has been talking about not using that and instead using premeditation of adversity or whatever. Because the key point is like, picture a situation that you have difficulty with, and then like go through the rehearsal in your head about how you're going to surmount or circumvent that obstacle or deal with it in a better way.
Yeah.
That's the key to the exercise.
Mm-hmm.
Not in bathing in anxiety or depression and contemplating the extinction of the human race.
Yeah.
And I've seen people do this until they've just gotten really like despondent.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen it firsthand. Like I've been in front of somebody while they're doing it, and I'm like, "Yo, you're missing the point. Stop!" Like I literally slapped a dude.
Yeah.
The point is to take a situation that causes you distress, put yourself in that place mentally, and then figure out various ways of dealing with it that are better than what you've known yourself to do previously.
Yeah.
So then when you encounter the situation, if you've done it on a regular basis, you can then put those things into practice that are more, as the Stoics would say, in accordance with nature,
Right.
your own nature as a human being. So yeah, I mean, that's just,
Yeah.
confessions of a drug-addled mind. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, I mean, knowledge is great. Like being able to like read something and be like, yeah, this is wonderful. Like I'm gonna turn this idea over and over. That's a skill.
Right.
And it's useful, but it's never gonna turn into wisdom because wisdom means applied knowledge. Continuously applied knowledge that has an effect.
Right.
And along with that, wisdom is also another component of wisdom is the result of the application of that knowledge, whether positive or negative in effect, what you take away from it.
Right.
So, yeah. I don't know, dude. That's basically all I have to say today.
Yeah, me too.
You have anything else you want to add before we dip out?
I think I said everything I would want to say about this one.
Be cool, people. You know, I said this the other day in a post I made on Facebook, but no matter where you are, no matter what kind of time you're living in, um, whether present or future, remember something like this has happened before and human life has persisted. It's all about time doesn't magically fix or change anything,
Right.
at least as far as humanity is concerned.
Mm-hmm.
What matters is what we do individually and collectively, and choose your actions wisely.
Yep.
All right, dudes.
All right.